Well, they did it. The Arizona Diamondbacks are going to the World Series. An absolutely crazy run. The DBacks had the 7th worst odds heading into this season. I mean, we're talking about a team that just 2 years ago lost 110 games. Last year, going 74-88, and this year, none too pretty either. 84 wins, 78 losses, finishing as the number 6 seed, the final wild card. And after 2 consecutive sweeps against the Brewers and the Dodgers in the wild card and the division series respectively, the D-backs found themselves down 2-0 against the Philadelphia Phillies. But that wouldn't last, because the D-backs would go on to win 4 of the next 5 games, including 2 Game 6 and Game 7 in Philadelphia. And while there was some big performances from the bats in Arizona that helped them win that series, ultimately it was the pitching, but probably not the guys that you would expect. The Snakes were not supposed to win this series. They were not supposed to be playing in the Fall Classic, but they are. And I think it's largely due to Lee's 3 outcasts. That being Ryan Thompson, Kevin Ginkel, and Paul Sewald. Ryan Thompson, I imagine a fair amount of you are familiar with. He was pretty important to the Rays World Series run in 2020. Of course, Kevin Cash had a whole damn stable of guys in that pen for the Rays, but Ryan Thompson was clearly one of the best. Going 9 1/3 innings, Ryan Thompson pitched to a 1.93 ERA across the 2020 postseason, and he followed that up with a pretty good performance in 2021 for the Tampa Bay Rays, but a couple years later, 2023, after just 17 2/3 innings pitched at a 6.11 ERA, the Rays let him go. Designated for assignment, and it was the Arizona Diamondbacks who picked him up. And he was terrific. Ryan Thompson was about as dominant as they come. A whip at 0.54. So it wasn't too surprising that manager Torey Lovullo really relied on Ryan Thompson come the postseason. And I would say it worked out pretty well for Arizona. 5 2/3 innings pitched, just 1 earned run from Ryan Thompson, shutting down that dominant Phillies lineup. And without a doubt, the biggest reason for Ryan Thompson's success and turnaround this year coming to Arizona is the walks. His best year in Tampa, he allowed 2.3 walks per 9. This year, he was all the way up to 3.6. And between the coaching staff there in Arizona and Ryan Thompson relying a bit more on that sinker, he was able to get his walks down drastically, all the way to 0.7. And Ryan Thompson is not a velocity guy. His sinker sat in about 90.4 mile per hour average. Nor is Thompson really a big strikeout guy. Despite how good he was for the D-backs, his strikeout per 9 was only at 6.2. His whiff rate, some of the lowest in the league. He's a 2-trick pony. You see him, it's going to be the sinker or it's going to be the slider. But he's as good as anybody in the league at getting you to roll over and make bad contact, which you saw really come into play here. At bat against Bryson Stott, 2 runners on, nobody out, a tremendous sinker. The last second movement on this pitch, the difference between probably a 1 to 2 run scoring double into the gap and a huge double play. But the biggest factor in determining just how gross Ryan Thompson is, the pitch tunneling. 2-pitch guy, like I said, sinker, slider. Those 2 pitches work beautifully off one another. And especially so when they're released at the exact same point. There's no tell whether it's breaking outside or coming inside. Just look at these 2 examples against a right-handed batter, Nick Castellanos. The first one is going to be a sinker running in, and the second, a slider going outside. They're released at the exact same point. And we talked about the late break that sinker has. You are basically down on your knees praying, if you're the batter, that you guess right. So should you decide to sell out for that sinker, best prepare, because the bend on that slider is going to make you look silly. Kevin Ginkel also comes with a fair amount of baggage. He was drafted on 3 separate occasions. His first selection in 2014 by the Giants in the 16th round, coming out of Southwestern College in Chula Vista, California. He declined. He went back to college, where the next year he was drafted by the Boston Red Sox, the 26th round. Once again, he declined, went back to school, this time the University of Arizona, and finally he ended up with the Arizona Diamondbacks in the 22nd round of the 2016 MLB draft. And now, I would be a lying man if I told you that I knew the whole story of Kevin Ginkel coming into the postseason. To be honest, I wasn't really familiar with him before this year, where he put up some pretty damn good numbers. But before this year, he had 4 seasons of work and less than 100 innings pitched to show for it. In 2023, 60 games, 65 innings pitched, and an ERA at 2.48. Describing Ginkel very quickly, he gives up lots of walks. He has great strikeout potential. Kevin relies upon the 4-seam and slider primarily, but he will pull the sinker out on occasion. It was actually pretty effective, and the 17 times he threw it, where it led to a result, no hits. A 0 batting average in 17 plate appearances on the sinker. But he was certainly made famous by that slider this postseason. Plenty of highlights came his way as he struck out plenty of Phillies. And I think what really helped Kevin Ginkel be effective in the playoffs here is he was getting ahead of the count, which is super important for a guy that pitches like he does. The slider is his strikeout pitch. It's his put-away pitch. As you see some of these clips, the fastball primarily using that early in counts to get ahead. The Phillies were not really as aggressive as they should have been. A lot of the early 0-0 four-seamers that Kevin was throwing were in the zone, and the Phillies, more often than not, were taking, which the Phillies got ahead in this series because they were aggressive on the fastball against Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly. And as Ginkel progresses into the count, he's going to throw a lot of those high fastballs above the letters to see if you're going to chase, because it's all setting up for the big dropper, that slider, which has a ton of vertical drop. You get a nice look at it on the strikeout of Alec Boehm right here. It's pretty, the way it flutters down. It's all about changing the eye level. The four-seamers up high are going to set up for that slider down low in the zone. And yes, these are being spiked. These aren't very close to being strikes, but it's that, again, last-second break, that vertical drop he's getting on the slider, which is tough. You're seeing these four-seamers at chest height, up to neck height, and all of a sudden, last second, you're getting one drop down to the dirt. Very difficult to adjust. The best strategy is to be aggressive on these four-seamers and don't allow yourself to get behind the count. You see right here, 22nd in baseball this season on out-of-zone swing and miss percentage. It wasn't just the Phillies that were having trouble with that slider. It was pretty much a league-wide issue. And finally, Paul Sewald. He's certainly the least outcast out of these 3. He was drafted in the 10th round in 2012 by the New York Mets. Spent a couple of seasons and about 150 innings pitched of relief work. Nothing really materialized, and he ended up going to Seattle in 2021. And it didn't take long for him to become the face at the back end of the bullpen, becoming the closer, and a huge reason why the Mariners were able to put together a postseason appearance for the first time in forever last year. On to this year, he was pretty good as well. If you look at the numbers 2022 compared to the 43 innings he pitched before getting traded by the Mariners this year, pretty much on par. But ultimately, come the trade deadline, Seattle picked up the phone and traded Paul Sewald to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Seattle had a great bullpen. On the season, they ranked number 4 in all of baseball, and Andres Munoz proved to be more than capable of handling closing duties for them. And this one's a bit of a different story than Ryan Thompson and Kevin Ginkel. Paul Sewald wasn't great when he came over to Arizona. Walks per 9 at 5.1 coming over to Arizona. His whip at 1.47. He was not locked down for the DBacks. Until the playoffs, of course. Because against Philly, he pitched 4 innings, he allowed 2 base runners, no runs, and struck out 6. And Paul Sewald, extremely fun to watch pitch. He's another one of those guys that primarily is only going to throw 2 pitches. It's the fastball and the sweeper. He does not throw hard. Average fastball velocity, about 92 miles an hour. He's deceptive. He doesn't allow hard hit contact very often. Certainly some parallels to Ryan Thompson in that regard, which you can see right here. Paul is again one of these pitchers that makes his money off pitch tunneling between that four-seam fastball and that sweeper. Same arm slot, same release point, 2 very different trajectories, which if that sweeper's bending like Paul Sewald wants it to, it's going to put batters into a blender. And something that makes Paul pretty unique is how successful he is with that four-seam fastball. We talked about it, it's only coming in about 92, 93 miles an hour on a good day, but yet when you watch these clips, you see consistently batters are late on it. Pitch in the zone, fairly hittable, coming in 92. You'd think it's going to get clobbered, but it really gives hitters a tough time, especially when Paul can work off that sweeper. And the main reason is, again, the arm slot. From the point where Paul releases the ball, it almost gives the illusion that the four-seamer is rising because he's not finishing so much over the top, which can really help to blur that four-seam fastball and thus blend so well together with that sweeper. So with these 3 guys, Ryan Thompson, Kevin Ginkel, and Paul Sewald, 3 castaways that teams didn't want. They didn't want to draft them. They thought they had better players, so they ended up trading them or releasing them outright, which came on to steal this National League pennant from the Phillies. Without these 3, I don't think the Diamondbacks get past Philadelphia. I don't think they take it to Game 7. And there was other guys too, such as Brandon Pfaadt, who I wanted to give an honorable mention. Unfortunately, doesn't really fit the outcast narrative. DBacks drafted him fairly high. He was a top 60 prospect coming into the year, but he was outstanding, and without his 2 brilliant starts in the NLCS, also, Arizona does not move on. And of course, for the DBacks, the job is not done yet. Heading out of the World Series against the Texas Rangers, I'm pumped. I'm super excited to see the 3-headed monster, the Cerberus of undesirables of Ryan Thompson, Kevin Ginkel, and Paul Sewald getting another chance to shine, and a little "I told you so" to the teams that dumped them.